rich American founder tried to have Ohio enter the Union as two different states so that his political party could get more votes in Congress. Hi Founder fans, Jason here, and today we'll be discussing a man named Arthur St. Clair. Now, Arthur St. Clair had served in the French and Indian War before moving to western Pennsylvania, where he bought a large swath of land and did what many wealthy people on the frontier would do. Served as a judge, served as a town clerk, even served as a notary. Now, when the Revolutionary War broke out, Arthur St. Clair was a patriot, and he joined the Continental Army, and he was quickly promoted to be a brigadier general. And he served throughout the war in various levels of the campaign and served fairly successfully, even at a certain point serving on George Washington's staff. But Arthur St. Clair's story becomes really interesting after the Revolutionary War ends. So he's elected to the Continental Congress, and in 1787 he's actually elected president of the Continental Congress. The Continental Congress at the time was serving under the Articles of Confederation in New York City. Meanwhile, in the summer, a bunch of his friends met for the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. And down in Philadelphia, they wrote a whole new government. Now, seeing the writing on the wall, the Continental Congress was not getting a whole lot done, but it was under Arthur St. Clair's time as president that they created the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And this is probably the most important piece of legislation ever passed by the Continental Congress, because it organized the Northwest territories that had been won in the Revolutionary War from Great Britain, which include most of modern Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, sections of other states as well. Now, this is a huge chunk of land that was brought into the United States, and pretty much as soon as he left the Continental Congress, well, Arthur St. Clair was chosen to be governor of the Northwest Territory. Like I said, this was a large swath of land and a very important position. So much so that when George Washington became president, he actually chose Arthur St. Clair to be the senior officer in the U.S. Army. It wasn't called the U.S. Army quite then, but he was essentially the senior officer in the U.S. Army. Commander-in-chief in a fashion. So, St. Clair's out there, he's governor of the territory, he leads the army, and there are a bunch of Native American tribes that come together to try and get the Americans out, because they don't like the treaty that Britain signed. They felt they had been left in the dust, even though they trusted the British. Now, the British had not evacuated their forts on the frontier either, and they didn't like the treaty either, so they helped the Native Americans suppress settlers coming out, and actually they would raid settlements of Americans. Now, St. Clair didn't want any of this. When he arrived, these hostilities had already been breaking out in what became known as the Northwest Indian War, and St. Clair wanted to put a stop to it. So he got about 1,000 men and went out to fight the Native Americans. Fortunately for him, they were taken by surprise and absolutely slaughtered, and in a battle that became known as St. Clair's Defeate, well, of those 1,000 or so men, less than 20 left the field unharmed. Well, fortunately for America, George Washington quickly had Arthur St. Clair resign as senior officer of the army, although he did maintain the position of governor. Instead, he was replaced with Mad Anthony Wayne. And lucky for America, lucky for the United States, Mad Anthony Wayne was able to get out there and lead troops and win the Northwest Indian War. Not so lucky for the coalition of Native American tribes who were fighting them, but that's neither here nor there. I shouldn't say that, but that is how it worked out. Anyway, Arthur St. Clair does remain as governor of the Northwest Territory for about another 15 years, all the way through Washington and Adams until Thomas Jefferson becomes president, and suddenly Ohio has enough people to start considering joining the Union as a state. And Arthur St. Clair decided, well, why don't I try and get it in there as two separate states? Because Arthur St. Clair was a Federalist, and Thomas Jefferson certainly was not. Now, St. Clair's ruse of trying to get it in as two separate states so there'd be more delegates in the House, Federalists in the House of Representatives, there'd be more Federalists in the Senate. Well, Thomas Jefferson didn't want this at all, so he recalled him as governor and had him replaced. And from there, Arthur St. Clair, who already had a long career, decided to retire to the property he owned in western Pennsylvania. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit like. If you're new here and you want more videos like this 5 days a week, plus a fun live one on Saturday, well, hit subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to bringing you another video tomorrow.